The name on the application form made Renata Holt set down her coffee. She had been moving through the stack the way she always did on Thursday afternoons. Quickly, without ceremony, the way you move through things that do not require your full attention. The janitorial position at Holt-Meridian had posted 3 weeks ago. 41 applications. Most of them were exactly what you would expect. A few had gaps. One had listed people person under special skills, which she had found both charming and unhelpful. She was on the 37th when she stopped. The name at the top of the page was Daniel Fawcett. Renata did not send for him through the front desk. She did not ask her assistant to schedule an interview slot between 2 and 4, the way she had with the others. She closed the folder, held it flat against the desk with both hands for a moment, and then she opened it again. The handwriting on the application was neat and unhurried. He had listed a local address, a neighborhood she knew east side, close to the river. Under previous employment, there were 3 lines. The most recent said, Building Maintenance, Freelance, 2019 present. Before that, 8 years at a research institute she recognized immediately. And before that, a line she read twice, Lead Systems Analyst, Stratcor Atlantic, 2003 to 2011. She sat with that for a while. Then she picked up her phone and called Marcus in HR. The Fawcett application, she said. Did you flag it? A pause. We were going to. He's overqualified by about 15 years. I know, Renata said. Don't reject it. I'll handle the interview myself. Daniel Fawcett arrived 12 minutes early. Renata was watching from the second-floor window when he came through the main entrance. Not because she had planned to watch, but because she happened to be walking past and something made her stop. He wore a dark jacket that was clean but not new. He carried nothing. He did not look at his phone while he waited. He sat down in one of the chairs near the window and looked out at the parking lot with the particular stillness of a man who is comfortable in silence. He was 53, according to the application. He looked it, and he looked fine with it. When she came downstairs and introduced herself, he stood up and shook her hand without any of the stiffness that most people brought to that moment. He said his name, even though she already knew it. She appreciated that. She took him to the smaller boardroom rather than her office. She wasn't sure why. It felt less transactional maybe, or maybe she wanted to see how he moved through a room. He moved through it the way he had moved through the lobby, without urgency, without performance. I should tell you up front, she said, once they were seated, that I looked you up after I saw your application. I hope that isn't strange. It isn't, he said. You were at Stratcor, yes, lead analyst, the Meridian project. She paused. That was ours, or it was the beginning of ours before the merger. He nodded once. I know. She waited for him to say something more about it. He didn't. The position you've applied for, she said carefully, is facilities maintenance. Cleaning, minor repairs, building rounds. It pays. I know what it pays. I read the posting. She looked at him. Most people in your position would find that beneath them. I was going to say surprising. He was quiet for a moment. Outside, a car alarm went off somewhere in the parking lot and then stopped. I need steady hours, he said. Daytime. Home by 5. That matters more to me right now than the title. Wanted to ask why. She didn't. Do you have children? She asked instead, because it was a reasonable question in a reasonable interview, and because it wasn't quite the question she was actually asking. A daughter, he said. 12. She takes the bus home from school at 3:45. There it was. Your application says you've been doing freelance maintenance work for 6 years. That's right. Before that, the Research Institute, computational modeling, environmental systems. It was contract work, mostly remote. He said it plainly, without apology and without pride. Just the facts arranged in order. And before that, Stratcor. She folded her hands on the table. Daniel, you built half the analytical framework that this company still runs on. You know that, right? The core of what we use today, the load balancing architecture, the redundancy model that came from your work. He looked at her steadily. That was a long time ago. 12 years. Yes. What happened? He considered the question. Not evasively. She had the sense he was deciding how much of the answer was relevant, rather than how much he was willing to give. My wife got sick, he said. It took 3 years. After she died, I needed to be more available than that kind of work allows. So I made different choices. He said it without drama. Just the shape of it, laid out plain. Renata looked down at the folder for a moment. I'm sorry, she said. It was a while ago. That doesn't always make it shorter. He looked at her then, a little differently than he had before, as though she had said something he hadn't expected. It was brief. He didn't comment on it. Can you start Monday? She said. He blinked once. For the janitorial position. Yes. You're not going to offer me something else. I'm going to offer you what you applied for, she said. Unless that's changed. A pause then. Monday works. He started on a Monday in early November, which in Halifax meant the wind came in off the water and settled into the building in ways the heating system never quite resolved. Renata did not make a point of watching him. She had a company to run. But she noticed things, the way you notice things when you are paying attention without admitting it. He was thorough. Not performatively thorough. He didn't linger in visible areas or make a show of effort when staff were around. He was simply thorough the way a person is thorough when they've decided to do something and don't see the point in doing it halfway. The third-floor break room, which had been a source of low-grade irritation for years, started being clean in a way it hadn't been before. Not just wiped down clean, organized clean, the kind that suggested someone had thought about how the space was used. He said good morning to people, and that was mostly it. The younger staff didn't quite know what to do with him. He didn't fill silences with small talk. He didn't explain himself or make himself easy. He was just there, doing what he came to do, and then he was gone by 5 o'clock. 2 weeks in, something happened that Renata heard about secondhand, and then from 3 other people, and then decided to go and see the evidence of herself. The company had been working through a problem with their resource allocation model, a flaw that had been surfacing for months in the form of small inconsistencies that none of the analysts had been able to trace back to a root cause. The systems team had a standing weekly meeting about it. On the Tuesday of Daniel's 3rd week, they had been in the 3rd-floor conference room for 2 hours, the whiteboard covered in notation, when he had come in to empty the recycling. He had paused at the door. One of the junior analysts, a young man named Patrick Chu, who had been with the company for 8 months and had not yet learned the professional habit of keeping his thoughts inside his head, had looked up and said, "Do you understand any of this?" It was not unkind exactly. It was the kind of thing you say when you've been staring at a problem for 2 hours and a stranger walks in and the incongruity is almost funny. Daniel had looked at the board. He had looked at it for a moment that lasted longer than it should have, long enough that Patrick had started to feel a little odd about having said anything. Then Daniel said, "Your baseline weighting is off. You're applying equal distribution across variable nodes, but the 3rd cluster runs on a different refresh cycle. The error compounds every 48 hours. No one said anything. He picked up the recycling bin, tied the bag, set a fresh one in place, and left. There was a silence in the room. Then Patricia Huang, who had been the lead on the project for 6 months, and who did not impress easily, walked to the whiteboard and stood there for a long time. "He's right," she said. Renata heard about it that afternoon. She went and looked at the board herself, even though the technical details were beyond her. She stood there and thought about a man in a maintenance uniform who had looked at 6 months of unsolved work and seen the answer in the time it took to empty a bin and had said so quietly and walked out. She went to find him on the 2nd floor. He was in the supply closet sorting cleaning materials with the same absence of drama he brought to everything else. When she appeared in the doorway, he straightened up but didn't look startled. "Patricia Huang wants to know if you'd be willing to talk through what you saw on the whiteboard," Renata said. "I'm on shift until 5 after 5 then." He considered it. "For how long?" "As long as it takes, I suppose. I need to be home by 6:30. My daughter has swimming on Tuesdays. We'll have you out by 6. He agreed. The conversation lasted 40 minutes. Renata sat in the back of the room and said almost nothing. She watched Patricia and 2 senior analysts follow Daniel through the logic, which he laid out in the same unhurried way he did everything. Not teaching exactly, just explaining. He drew on the whiteboard with the marker held loosely, like a man who had done this thousands of times and didn't need to think about the grip. At one point, Patrick asked where he'd worked before. "Here and there," Daniel said, and moved on. At 5:58, he capped the marker and said he had to go. Patricia thanked him. He nodded, put on his jacket, and left. After he was gone, Patrick said, "What was that?" Patricia picked up the marker he'd left on the board ledge and turned it in her hands. That, she said, was someone who actually understood the problem. Renata called Daniel on Thursday evening. She had his number from the application. She almost didn't call. It felt like a boundary of some kind or the edge of one, but she did. He answered on the second ring. "I want to talk to you about something," she said. "Not as your employer, or not only as your employer. Can you come in tomorrow before your shift?" A pause. "How early?" 7:30. "I can do that." She had the folder open on her desk when he arrived. The building was mostly empty at that hour, just the facilities team and one or two early arrivals in finance. He came in through the side entrance, which was the one staff used, and she met him in the hall. He was wearing the same dark jacket. "I pulled the original files from the Stratcor work," she said, once they were in her office. "From before the merger, from the transition documents. Your name is on most of it." He sat across from her. He didn't say anything. "I've been running this company for 11 years, Renata said. "We've rebuilt pieces of that system 4 times. Every time we run into a wall, we bring in consultants who charge more per day than some of our senior staff make in a month. And every time what they give us is an approximation of something that already exists in the original architecture." She set her hands flat on the desk. "The architecture you built." He looked at her steadily, not uncomfortable, not pleased, just listening. "I'm not saying this to embarrass you," she said. "I know. I'm saying it because I want to offer you something different than what you applied for. Not instead of, if you need the daytime hours, we keep those. But I'd like you to consult, formally, on the systems rebuild we're planning for the spring, compensated separately, structured around your schedule." He was quiet for long enough that she started to wonder if she'd misread something. "You could have offered me this in the original interview," he said. "I know. Why didn't you?" "Because you applied for a janitorial position," she said. "And I thought you probably had a reason." He looked out the window for a moment. Through the glass, Halifax was doing what Halifax did in November, the sky gray and low, the harbor somewhere beyond the buildings, present even when invisible. "My daughter's name is Abby," he said, which was not what she had expected him to say. "She's 12. She was 4 when her mother got sick, and 6 when she died. She barely remembers her." He paused. "For the last 6 years I've been home, not every minute, but close to it. I've been there in the morning, and I've been there when she gets off the bus, and I've been there for swimming on Tuesdays and parent-teacher interviews, and the school play, where she had 4 lines and forgot 2 of them and still looked like the most important person in the building." He was not emotional when he said it. He said it the way you describe something important that you've already made peace with. "The kind of work I used to do doesn't allow for that," he said. "So I stopped doing it." Renata waited. "I'm not looking to go back to what I was," he said. "But I'm not 20 years away from it either. I remember how it works." He looked at the folder on her desk. "If the arrangement is what you said, my hours, my schedule, then yes, I'd consider it." "It is," she said. "Then I'll think about it and let you know by Monday." "That's fine." He stood up and put on his jacket. Then he stopped at the door. "The mop," he said. She looked up. "Sorry. In the supply closet on 2. There's a mop that's been on the wrong hook since I started. I meant to mention it. It throws off the weight when you're moving between rooms. Could someone fix that?" She looked at him for a moment. "I'll have it done today." He nodded and left. He came back Monday and said yes. He said it briefly, at the start of his shift, in the hallway outside the supply room, as though it were a minor administrative matter that had been resolved. Then he went to work. The systems consultation began in January. He came in at 6:30 twice a week, worked through the architecture with Patricia's team for 90 minutes, and was at his regular post by 9. He did not move between departments with any more ceremony than he had before. He still said good morning and not much else. He still left at 5. What changed was the work. Not visibly, not dramatically, not in the way that makes a good story when you're telling it to someone who wants the satisfying version. The change was in the steadiness of things. Small problems that had been accumulating for years began to resolve. The redundancy flaw that had cost them 2 client contracts the previous quarter was patched and retested. A model that 3 consulting firms had declared too complex to rebuild was rebuilt cleanly in 6 weeks. Patrick Chu, who had asked the question that started all of it, told Renata one afternoon that working through a problem with Daniel was like watching someone read a language that everyone else had been trying to decode letter by letter. He said it with the specific bewilderment of someone who had recently realized he did not know as much as he thought he did, and had decided somewhat reluctantly that this was actually useful to know. Renata found Daniel in the building after hours once, a Wednesday in February, around 7, when she was the only one left on the 4th floor. She had forgotten her phone and come back for it. The lights were off in the main area, but the small conference room at the end of the hall was lit. Through the glass, she could see him at the whiteboard, writing. There was no one else in the room. She stood there for a moment. He wasn't working on anything she'd assigned. She could see the structure of it from the doorway, layers of notation she recognized as his, building something outward from a central point. She didn't interrupt. She picked up her phone from her desk and left. The next morning, the whiteboard had been erased. Clean, floor to ceiling. She didn't ask about it. In March, the board requested a presentation on the system's rebuild. Patricia delivered it. In the middle of the presentation, one of the board members, a man named George Ellsworth, who had been on the Holt-Meridian board for 15 years and considered himself current on all relevant matters, asked a technical question that stopped the room. It was the right question which was the problem. It pointed to a gap that no one in the presentation had addressed. Patricia paused. Then she said, "I'll have to take that back to our lead analysts." "Who is that?" Ellsworth asked. There was a brief silence. "Daniel Fawcett," Patricia said. Ellsworth frowned slightly. "The name isn't familiar. Is he new?" "He joined us in November," Renata said from the end of the table. "What's his background?" "Systems architecture. He built the original framework this company runs on." She said it evenly, without drama, before the merger, before any of us were here. Ellsworth was quiet for a moment. "Can we get him in the room?" he said. "He'll be available at 5, Renata said. Daniel arrived at 5:03, having apparently stopped to change out of his work clothes. He wore a gray shirt and dark trousers, unremarkable and correct. He looked at the room the way he always looked at rooms, like a man who had been in enough of them to have stopped being impressed by their furniture. He answered Ellsworth's question in 4 sentences. Then Ellsworth asked 3 more, each one a step further into the architecture of the problem, and Daniel answered each of them with the same economy and the same certainty. At no point did he look at his notes, because he didn't have any. Afterward, in the hallway, Ellsworth found Renata. "How long has he been doing maintenance work?" he said. It was not quite the question it sounded like. "Since 2019. And before that?" "Stratcore, the original systems build." Ellsworth looked back at the conference room door, where the last of the board members were filing out. "Why did he leave?" "Family," Renata said. "He had reasons." Ellsworth was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "He should be at the table." "He is at the table," Renata said. "He's been at the table since January. You just met him." In April, Renata offered Daniel a formal position, senior systems analyst, full-time, adjusted hours. She expected him to take the same few days he had taken before. He didn't. "Can I still do the building rounds?" he said. She looked at him. "Mornings," he said, "first hour. I like the quiet. I don't want to give that up." She thought about it for a moment. There was probably a policy reason to say no. She decided not to look for it. "That's fine," she said. He started the new role on the 1st of May. He kept the 6:30 building rounds. He answered his email between 9 and 10, then again at 3. He left at 5. Abby's school play was in late April, the spring production, which she had apparently secured a larger role in than the winter one. Daniel mentioned it once, in passing, on a Thursday. "How many lines?" Renata asked. 11. She's been practicing at the kitchen table every night for 2 weeks. The smallest pause. "She's gotten all of them." Renata smiled at that. On the last Friday of April, the supply closet on the 2nd floor was cleaned out and reorganized to make room for an additional storage unit. The cleaning materials were moved. The hooks were rearranged. The old mop, the one Daniel had mentioned on his first day, the one with the worn-down grip and the slightly uneven head, was gone. In its place was a new one, still in the packaging, set on the correct hook. Daniel noticed it. Renata knew he noticed it because she happened to be passing the hall when he opened the closet door, and she saw him stand there for a moment, looking at it. He didn't say anything. He took out what he needed and closed the door. But she had seen it, that brief stillness, the hand resting on the doorframe for just a second. The look of a man who has spent a long time not expecting to be seen and is still getting used to the surprise of it. She walked on. She didn't mention it. Some things don't need to be said to be real.